All right, good evening, or whatever time everyone is. I'm here to present my work on Romance differential object marking, and the title of my talk is "What is D in DOM?" Before I begin, I'd like to thank several people for making this possible. First of all, to the members of HLL, Hispanic and Lusophone Linguistic Symposium, especially to Sonia Barnes, the organizer of this event, for inviting me to present my work. My supervisors and mentors, Professor Nigel Vincent, Pino Longobardi, Ian Roberts, etc., for supervising my work in Romance linguistics. To the audiences and organizers of some conferences that I took part in the past, as mentioned here. And lastly, I'd like to thank my old Spanish teacher at my old school, Sherborne, Mr. Craig Bryson, for introducing me to this phenomenon. It is the Spanish personal eye back in the summer 2002. I suppose I owe him my entire career. For teaching me this. Right, so let's begin. I've chosen a particularly provocative title here. The title of my talk is "What is D in DOM?" This may be a bit catchy, but an answer to this is quite obvious. D is the first letter in DOM, so D and DOM clearly have a very close a relationship. But we'll get to this once we begin. All right, DOM stands for your differential object marking. It's actually part of a bigger phenomenon called the differential argument marking. A recent book by Curzon and Whitlatch Makarevich, they give a pretty good definition of differential argument marking. A quote here: any kind of situation where an argument, here object, of a predicate, here verb, bearing the same generalized semantic argument role. I think it'll be better to call this a grammatical relation, which is an object here, may be morphologically coded in different ways depending on other factors like argument role, clausal properties, polarity, TAM, embeddedness, etc. Right, because I've put some brackets there just to make this contextualized within the topic of my talk. I'm talking about differential object marking, so DOM. I mean, differential subject marking, DSM, does exist, but that's not relevant to what I'm talking about today. So I'm talking about differential object marking. And of course, we have it in a Romance, especially the use of a Western Romance add, e.g. in Spanish, which we all know. Also, a Romanian pair. So if we look at some examples, it's been noted that differential object marking is based on animacy and referentiality of the object. That's widely noted. So, for example, in Spanish, you can say el director busca el carro o busca al empleado. So the difference is el carro, the car, or al empleado. The employee, which is human and definite, requires this a, so marking. Romanian, similarly, I don't speak I'm Romanian, but I can try this. Au laudat romanu classic versus laudat pe studentul inteligent. All right, so Romanu classic, which means a classic novel, versus pe studentul inteligent. Okay, the intelligent student, which is also human and definite, and hence requires pe. So I think at its core, DOM, exemplified in a Romance, is the differences in morphological marking, zero marking versus the use of a and pe for marking human definite objects. So it's zero versus some kind of marker. And one thing about Romance and DOM is that it's been noted by people like Rolf, DOM is actually attested in nearly all varieties of Romance. I mean, typologists are very impressed with this use of dom in Spanish. For example, people like Boson call this the Spanish personal a. But Romanists have actually discovered evidence for this use of dom in pretty much all dialects of Romance. I'll be focusing on Western Romance ad here because that's the domain that I work with. My Romanian unfortunately is non-existent, so I should leave that to other scholars. And the Western Romance ad is certainly not restricted to Spanish. A famous quote here, provided by Nocentini in Italian. So I've translated this. It says, the Romance area presents the phenomenon dom as an innovation phased in time and discontinuous in space and at an incipient stage in many areas. All right, so not only is doms but widely attested throughout the Romance speaking area. There's also a lot of a variation, as mentioned by Nocentini here, and it's phased in time, discontinuous in space, and it's also at different stages and some development in different areas. We've mentioned before that the DOM parameters are the animacy and referentiality of the object, as I briefly mentioned on the previous slide. And what I expect from Nocentini's quote is that there is an uneven distribution and also a lot of a micro variation of DOM in different varieties of Romance. I've argued before. I'm going to argue here. There's a hierarchy of Western Romance DOM that we can schematize here. The Spanish DOM is heavy, is strong, as pretty much everyone has noted. Spanish is DOM heavy. Italian dialects has a weaker intermediate system of DOM that is more restricted than Spanish DOM. And finally, all the others, Western Romance dialects, they all have some form of DOM, but it's weaker than both Spanish and Italian dialects. So I think Western Romance DOM can be sort of summarized in this scale here. It's Spanish, Italian, then all the others. This will be made clear in the course of this presentation. All right, if we just get back to the title of my talk, D in DOM. What is D in DOM? Well, obviously, D is the first letter of DOM, but I'm going to define this in different ways. The first meaning of D is of course differential, because the DOM stands for differential object marking. So it's the use of minimal pairs of objects, right? So the use of add and pair versus zero marking. You would only use add and pair for marking certain types of objects. So it's minimal pairs, differentially marked. So if you look at the example that I gave on the first slide, el director busca el carro versus busca al empleado. Okay. El carro versus al empleado. The second meaning of D within a grammatical framework is that D often stands for the functional category det, as influentially proposed by people like Schabowski, Abney, and Cinque, etc. And det, determiner as a grammatical a category has some very important grammatical functions like definiteness, specificity, and case, as proposed by Pino, Longobardi, John Lyons, etc. The specificity, can be sort of, seen in some famous examples, like the one here. Busco a una persona que sabe usar la computadora versus busco una persona que sepa usar la computadora. Right, because in the first one, where a is obligatory, and also the verb in the relative clause has the indicative mood, a una persona que sabe. This is referring to a specific a person, whereas in the second one, where a is optional and the verb in the relative clause is irrealis subjunctive. It's a busco una persona que sepa usar la verga. The second one, it's any. I'm looking for a non-specific. I'm looking for anyone who might know how to use the computer, etc. So specificity here, seems to condition the use of If it's specific, then is obligatory. If it's not, then can be optional. So specificity clearly plays a role. And in line with the recent or contemporary formal Chomskyan analyses of functional categories. Functional categories can induce different types of merge, internal merge, which is largely in line with move and agreement, etc. Also external merge and the merge. So D can be realized in different ways via move or agree or merge, etc. We hence get a D2 D movement or agreement, hence entity, the movement or agreement, which gives us definite and specific nouns, and also some bare D elements, as famously proposed by Postal. For example, pronouns, which are sort of bare D elements. We'll see, these different types of D elements as we go on. But D here stands for det, which is another factor which seems to condition dom. Another factor which triggers a dom, which is quite fascinating, and one that I've recently come to love, and that's the use of divinity. This is a scene in Portuguese. It's sometimes called o acusativo de divindade, or a marcação de divindade. So the accusative of divinity, or the marking of divinity. Let's have a look at this. In Portuguese, you can often see people say this: temer a Deus or amar a Deus. Okay, so you revere God or you love Christ. Okay, and the objective, which is divine, is regularly marked by a, temer a Deus, amar a Cristo, etc. Versus amar o filho, love the son, where filho here denotes a specific person. You love a son, a real a person. You can also say amar a filho, in which case son here refers to Jesus Christ, son of God. So in Portuguese, a here seems to be used exclusively for marking divine objects, divinities. And this can be sort of analyzed within the context of animacy, because divinity seems to be a subset of human objects, and it seems to be is used for marking a special type, a divine human, a special type of human object, i.e. divine, which is noted in the Portuguese, but also in medieval Romance. All right, so in my presentation today, D in dom, stands for sort of three meanings: differential, determiner, and divinity. I propose to analyze, how D in dom, defined in these three terms, can be teased down. That can enrich our understanding of Romance dom. All right, so let's hit some groundwork. I mean, because dom is a huge topic, and it's certainly not restricted to a Romance. It's cross-linguistically very richly attested, as Curzon and Witlakt Makarevich account for in their recent book. Dom can be analyzed as being triggered by nominal and verbal categories. The nominal category is the object argument, and the verbal category is the main verb, the verbal predicates. And in the nominal domain, we've seen that animacy and referentiality are the two main factors in dom in Romance, but also beyond. And dom here correlates with markedness, marked categories in these dimensions tend to be morphologically marked. These dimensions have been variously analyzed. So let's go through them. So, for example, animacy. The late and great Silverstein, has proposed that animacy so that affects how human process language, and that certainly applies to a dom. So human, non-human animates like animals and plants and insects, all the biological beings, I find it sort of inanimate. So, humans and animates are marked in comparison to inanimates, and humans and animates tend to be marked, whereas inanimates tend to be unmarked. That's the idea. The element that's higher up in the scale tends to be marked, and the more marked it is, the more likely that it will be morphologically marked. Referentiality, which is a very important a notion in my talk. Definite, indefinite specific, and indefinite non-specific. All right, so definiteness and specificity are slightly different. It can be definite, but if it's indefinite, it can also be specific or non-specific, as we saw, in one of my examples earlier on. There's also grammatical distinctions of your person and number. So, for example, person, first person, second person, third person. Number, singular, individual, dual, plural, and plural, i.e., so mass and group. So here, the higher up in the scale, the more likely it is that it'll be marked. So, first persons tend to be more likely marked than second person, which is more likely marked than third person, etc. Singular, more likely marked than plural, etc. And some verb types also play a role in this nominal hierarchy. And there's pronouns tend to be more marked than proper names, which tend to be more marked than common nouns. All right, so that's the a nutshell of the nominal factors behind Dom. Verbal factors, which is another important thing to bear in mind. This is to do with the transitivity and effectiveness. If we analyze the various verb types formally, so a formal analysis of event structure, in the classic Wendler partition of verb types and event structure, you've got states, you've got activities, you've got transitive verbs, which have been analyzed as achievements and accomplishments. Formally, it's actually quite widely proposed that transitive verbs like achieve and accomplish, they differ from statives and activities in having this become bit. Transitive verbs entail some sort of a change of state that stative verbs and activities do not have. So that's a very important formal diagnostic for analyzing transitive verbs. A technical term there is kinesis, which Clifford applies, following Hopper and Thompson's classic analysis to Spanish. And the object which changes its predication, undergoes kinesis. In Spanish, Potier's famous analysis, he proposes this scale, matar, which is more marked than ver, which is more marked than considerar, which is more marked than tener. Right, so matar always has ab, matar a alguien, to kill somebody. Tener, however, which means to have, to possess, rarely, very rarely takes a, because its verb doesn't entail kinesis or effectiveness. And so, if we can see some minimal pairs, if we compare tener and mantener, which have different meanings, you can say tiene 12 hijos. She has 12 children, versus mantiene a 12 hijos. Tiene 12 hijos, and this means a possession. And so there's no kinesis or effectiveness, and so you wouldn't use a here. Whereas with mantener, there is kinesis because it's the action of rearing, and rearing entails some change of states, formal semantically. So you would definitely have to use mantiene a 12 hijos. There are also some amenable pairs here, which are quite interesting. Tener denoting a possession, doesn't take a, but however, in other meanings or other constructional uses of tener, we've got this. Tiene a su madre cerca, consigo, a su lado, etc. This doesn't mean, she possesses her mother, but rather she includes, she invites her mother to her side, nearby, etc. So tiene a su madre, which also entails some kinesis or effectiveness. Tengo al presidente por hombre honrado. I consider, this really means I consider, rather than possess. I consider the present as an honorable band. Also, estos estados tienen al español como idioma oficial. So, these states tienen al español, they designate Spanish as an official language. So again, it's also stronger than merely having, it's designating, which also entails some kinesis. And the examples, despite being the same verb, tener, also employ a, which shows that transitivity, effectiveness, does seem to be another important factor that conditions a. Right, so if you look at the DOM parameters, formally, all right, okay, so in accordance with the contemporary assumptions, formally, functional categories, are used to detail, parametric a variation, and they're also cartographically arranged. All right, so in the nominal domain that's famously argued for by people like Abney, Zamparelli, Cinque, etc. We've got various functionals like det, which is the one that I mentioned at the beginning, but there's also dem and number and gender and pers, etc. And the verbal domain, in order to analyze event structure, various types of functional categories have proposed, like initiate, become, which you saw on the previous slide, but there's also do and be, etc. Assuming that add is a case marker, we can actually define some DOM triggers in terms of selectional features that trigger case. That's select add from different functional projections. All right, so in the nominal domain, in the lexical root, animacy, like human, animate, and divine, can sort of trigger the use of add. Referentiality, which can be internally merged or externally merged. If it's a movement or agreement type, we get a definiteness, a specificity, and also individuality, which we see later on. But also, bare D elements like five features and pronouns and proper names, and these may also trigger DOM. Verbally, or in the verbal domain, become or affect. So here, it's been it was famously proposed by Esther Torrego that DOM, the object marked by a, is actually in the specifier of the verb, by which she means that it's the affected object. And here we could say that the affected object is in the a position, i.e. the specifier of a specific functional head called become, because it denotes change of state, as we saw on the previous slide. All right, so if we look at if we're trying to map this out on the Romance of VP shell. Right, so let's go from the top. First of all, become. All right, so the affectee, which is in the specifier in the a position of become, which denotes the transitivity, effectiveness, kinesis, etc. We can also put a UK feature here, which selects K and it's a specifier position. So that's one trigger. In the D position, which which encodes some definiteness and specificity, etc. We can also designate a UK feature here, where D selects K, or D triggers the use of K. So definiteness and specificity trigger differential object marking. Five features, which can be divided into number, so singular, plural, and also person, first person, second person, third person, etc. These may also trigger DOM. Proper nouns, I'm analyzing proper nouns as a unique functional category in the nominal domain here, and they clearly are referential. So these may also select K. And finally, in the lexical root, all the way down, the lexical root, which if it's human or animate or divine, it may also sort of trigger DOM. So we get this type of picture where we see there are different sort of DOM triggers here. So DOM, formally schematized like this, seems to be quite layered. There are several layers of functional projections which trigger DOM. And this, as we will see, will become irrelevant later on. Right, okay, so if I just give a formal summary of Romance DOM, okay, so the lexical root, if it's animate or human or divine, may trigger DOM. In the D layer, we get an internal merge or external merge. Okay, so the various types of D elements may also trigger DOM. And also, All right, okay, this will become clearer later on, but your internal merge, the internally moving, i.e. moving a noun to D, which may trigger DOM, requires some kind of feature syncretism of the D in N. So it's an N, it's a lexical noun, it's an N element, but it has a D feature which triggers it not only to move or agree with D, but also to a trigger DOM. So UK here may be parasitic on some kind of feature syncretism here. External modes are different type of D layers which may also trigger DOM. And also in the verbal become, which denotes some transitivity, kinesis, may also have this UK feature which selects an affected argument in its specifying. All right, so this is a formal summary of the triggers behind DOM. And here, we can see how these triggers formally defined may be parameterized, as we'll see later on. Right, okay, so let's get down to some examples. The most interesting bit in Spanish, well, as we know, is DOM heavy. So we expect to see lots of examples, lots of good examples of DOM here. The example that I quoted earlier on, el director busca al empleado que sabe, pues el director busca el empleado que sepa. Wait. Oh, sorry. I should really say, el director busca un empleado que sepa. So this is a distinction between specificity and non-specificity here. Busco al empleado que sabe. I'm looking for the or a specific employee who knows. But el director que busca un empleado que sepa. I'm looking for any employee that might know how to do it, etc. I mean, here is optional in cases of non-specificity. But however, the people have actually noted that here is definitely possible. No one ever says here is ungrammatical. You can still use it, but the fact that it's optional. And for a language as DOM heavy as Spanish, optionality here probably is quite significant. But the point is actually possible in both of these examples. If you contrast it with the Italian dialects, where the various defects seem to be a bit more significant, because here it's not the fact that human objects can be marked by R. First of all, we should define animacy a bit more carefully here, because in Italian dialects, it's actually been pointed out that non-human animates like animals, for example, tend not to be marked by R. I mean, I don't speak of these Italian dialects, but I can try. Ammazzato u cane. You wouldn't say a u cane. Abu visto su cane. So asute u cane, etc. You wouldn't use when referring to these non-human animates. Whereas in Spanish, non-human animals like animals, etc., can be marked by even if they are marked less frequently than humans. And secondly, specificity here seems to be specificity and definiteness here seem to be a bigger role, because if the object is indefinite, so for example, ammazzato un cristiano with antipiga una piccioca. Okay, so they killed a kid, or they have snatched a girl. You tend not to use either. So, here it's human and definite. If the noun is human, but not definite, it shouldn't be marked by a. And the same goes for specificity. So, for example, cercare nu cristiane che sape lesca u bambarese. Okay, sape lesca here is subjunctive, according to people who work on barese. I think in the cercave nu cristiane. Okay, you wouldn't use a here. So a here is actually ungrammatical compared to optionality in Spanish. And also, interestingly, plurality also plays a role. If the object is plural, a here is optional or sometimes dropped. So, for example, arubaru a iso kushini, or arubaru iso kushini. apubiu a is pipiusu, or apubiu is pipiusu. In Neapolitan, you can say, io servo uomini e donne, but then you would never say io servo a uomini e donne. Oh, so a here seems to mark a singular or individual human nouns. If the noun is plural, even if it's human, it tends not to be marked by a either. All right, so if we compare, our Spanish dom and Italian dialects, Italian dialects, the key thing is that, it's a combination of humanness and referentiality. So formally speaking, in Spanish, an animate object is enough to trigger dom, whereas in Italian dialects, firstly, it's human. So non-human animals tend not to be marked. So it's got to be a human, and secondly, it's also got to be somehow referential. If it's definite or specific or singular, individual, etc., it's human and referential. So that's one variation that we can discern. And also, in both Spanish and Italian dialects, it's been noted widely that personal pronouns and proper names tend to be very heavily marked by a, because a here is obligatory. You cannot drop a ever. So, for example, in Spanish, bio a mí. In Sicilian, non viti a tia. In Albanese, vedibe agide. Neapolitan siente a me, etc. All of these, reference works. They all say that personal pronouns and proper names tend to be obligatorily marked by a. Whereas in others of Romance dialects, personal pronouns and or proper names are actually the only triggers for dom. So you don't see all the stuff on the previous slide. So for example, on this slide, in spoken Catalan, you would use to mark objects and to mark names. So, for example, again, I don't speak this, but I can try. Yo ayudo a tú, tú me ayudarás a mí. So, a tú, a mí. Fiore a la Maria. You will use a to mark personal pronouns and names. Portuguese, likewise. In both Brazilian Portuguese and European Portuguese, you will use a for marking mim or ti. So odeia a mim, odeia a ti. He hates me, and he hates you. But interestingly, you wouldn't use you wouldn't use a with other persons and numbers. So odeia ele, not a ele, but odeia ele, odeia ela, odeia nós, odeia você, vocês, etc. So it's only restricted to the first two persons in the singular. And in French, in Gallo Romance, traces of dom can be seen. So in varieties such as Bernays, so for example, il faut l'aider à elle, on avait trovato attitude. So similarly, only pronouns and names are marked by an. All the stuff on the previous slide, where animacy, referentiality, etc., those just don't figure at all. All right, so here we see that personal pronouns and proper names, which can be scaled in terms of person and number, as we argued in one of the previous slides, also tend to be triggers of dom. And lastly, divinity, which we also mentioned, is a key factor for a dom. We've got it in Portuguese, but also in medieval Romance. In contemporary Portuguese, you've got examples like this. Devemos amar a Deus. Okay, as we saw, if the object is divine, if it denotes a god, then then that should be marked by a. An example of medieval Catalan here is cited by Harry Meyer. So with ames a Jesus Cristo, a Jesus Cristo. In Portuguese, there are also some interesting examples like this. Tem que respeitar ao chefe, ao presidente, ao supervisor, or ao professor. One must respect a or one's boss, president, supervisor, teacher, etc. The key notion, I suppose, is respect or seniority. So in line with divinity, if the object is somehow superior to the speaker, one can also use a. So divinity here can be sort of, nuanced or extended slightly to also include respect or humility for a more senior or superior object. So in terms of lexical semantics, the subtype of human objects here are so human, divine, but also senior. If the object have these kinds of lexical features, they may also be marked by a. And also, in terms of the verb, it's been noted that this use of a tends to be used with verbs of worship or verbs of cult like adorar, temer, glorificar, rezar, orar, agradecer, etc. So these only take a within a religious context. Where divine objects are selected, but otherwise you tend not to get them. So again, we can look at it in terms of the nominal properties and also the verbal properties. If the noun is human, divine, senior, or if the verb denotes some kind of a cult or some kind of worship. Right. Okay. In terms of accounting for all of this, it's been as Rolf said, the use of dom is actually pan-Romance. It's definitely not restricted to Spanish, and given such a big distribution, it's led to people to argue that dom was actually formed in proto-Romance. There are people like Rosanna, Nicola, and more recent by Alexandru Mardale. They've argued that historically, the formation of a dom probably goes back to the prehistoric formation. And of course, Latin ad, as an allative, so a verb denoting direction, is attested with verbs that that take different types of arguments. I mean, the use of a for marking a Romance dative indirect objects is widely analyzed, as we shall see. So, for example, there's a famous example from Plautus. Dice demonstra praecipe quae ad patrem vis nuntiari, versus a later line, nunquid aliud vis patri nuntiari. Okay, so ad patrem nuntiari and patri nuntiari. In this passage, we say ad patrem and patri, just being used in parallel ways, which suggests that this is a glimpse of what proto-Romance dative formation was realized. Ad patrem and patri are constructionally equivalent, as we shall see. And of course, this type of structural ambiguity between two-place verbs and three-place verbs are actually attested in Romance. Bartra and Kaufman in one of her Dick's papers, and more recently Anna and Pineda, they've argued that it's actually not always straightforward to argue that a verb is two-place or a three-place verb, as we shall see. And the main verbs that give rise to a Romance dom, which I shall argue here, are these verbs. So arranged chronologically: the verbs of vision, verbs of serving, verbs of shouting, and verbs of begging and praying, as we shall see presently. All right. So if we go back to the very earliest examples, Plautus. This is some early stuff. So this is a pre-classical, almost 100 years before, all the major sort of, golden age Latin authors. But Plautus, being comedy and hence highly colloquial, contains many forms that anticipates Romance. So, for example, Plautus Triculentus, ad eram revidebo. I shall, revisit, or I shall visit my mistress again. Speak at me, look back at me. In classical Latin, a similar example also exists. So, for example, in Cicero's letters, vero ne nunc ad Caecilianum fabulum spectet, ad fabulum spectet, that he may watch the play by Caecilius. Patra quoque velet ad horas respicere. This is the famous story of Ariadne when she was abandoned on the shore. She sort of misses her homeland, so she looks back at the shores of her fatherland, ad horas respicere. In Christian Latin, examples are also abound. So, for example, in the Bible, Genesis 4:4, the respective dominus ad Abel et ad munera eus. And the Lord look back to respexit ad Abel et ad munera eos. In Jerome, aspiciant at me, and they will look at me. Aspiciant at me. Medieval Latin as well. So in the famous Merovingian documents, we get examples like this. So the varieties ad ipso vernum numquam aspexisset. Ad ipso vernum aspexisset. So this construction is actually throughout the history of a Romance, which makes it a very important construction for our purposes. And Jim Adams have argued that and in Latin isn't quite a case marker yet, because in all of these examples and clearly denotes some spatial direction. It means towards. All right, so if we look at the first Plautus example, revidere ad. Ad here actually denotes going to someone's home. The literary context makes clear that ad eram here means visit ad her, visit her house ad era. So revidere here isn't just a verb to vision; it's actually a verb of visiting. Similar thing goes for the assistro example. Ad fabulum spectet, that he may watch the play in the theater. Context also makes clear that he's not just watching a play. He's actually not at the theater, but when he does go to the theater, it's ad fabulum spectet. Ad here doesn't just denote vision; it also denotes traveling and visiting. In the second Plautus example, respice at me. And this clearly denotes not just looking back, but also rotation, because context makes clear that the speaker is actually behind the addressee. So respice at me clearly denotes turning back, rotation. Similarly for the Ovid example, and oras respica. So she's left abandoned on the shore, and she looks back at the shores of her fatherland. So this also denotes a rotation. So in line with what Jim Adams has argued, ad here is strongly spatial and directional, and it denotes visiting, traveling, and rotation. And the object, hence, is highly referential, because and being highly spatial, selects a highly referential object, which we shall see is significant later on. Right, in verbs of serving, a big jump here, but in the Christian era, we see some interesting examples which seem to anticipate Dom. As Rosanna has pointed out, that there are actually numerous verbs in Latin which select a dative, which is not the indirect object, but actually the direct object, because these verbs are actually two-place verbs, and these verbs select the ethic dative. For example, servire, juvare, nocere, etc. These verbs, they select a direct object because these are two-place predicates. And the dative here tends to denote semantic roles such as beneficiary or maleficiary, because you are serving or helping or harming someone. It's this kind of verbal semantics. Also, psych verbs like placere, interesse, or many sort of impersonal psych verbs also select dative, which denotes some experiencer, recipient, etc. All right, so these dative objects, beings, arguments of two-place verbs should be analyzed, within a formal grammatical framework as direct objects. The most important here is a servire, because of the earliest examples in Christian Latin. We get examples like this: ad cuius imperium caelum terra mare serviebant. All right, so ad cuius imperium serviebant. So heaven, earth, and sea served his domain. Ad imperium serviebant. So here we see ad seem to be replacing the original Latin dative here. And in the medieval period, a famous scholar, Omar Velázquez, he's actually written a whole paper about servire a in medieval Latin. So, for example, in Sahagún, ibe deben servire a Sancta Maria. Okay, servire a Sancta Maria. Or si non lo servire a Sancto Facundo, serviant a filis nostri cum suo solare. Si non lo servire a Sancto Facundo, serviant a filis nostris. Okay, if they're unwilling to serve a Saints Facundus, let them serve our filiis nostri, let them serve our sons, etc. So, okay, so in Christian and medieval Latin, there are actually quite a few examples of servire plus a, where a here replaces the original morphological dative. So that's one thing. And here a designates some semantic roles like a beneficiary, recipient, experiencer, etc. And these semantic roles are clearly human and animate. Furthermore, in the same period, we're getting the verbs of shouting. Clamare. Clamare is interesting because Latin clamare means to shout. In Romance, however, clamare tends to mean to call. Compounds of clamare like proclamar, acclamar in Spanish. These have a similar meaning to a shouting, but simplex forms of clamare. So, for example, in Spanish, llamar, Portuguese, chamar, Italian, chiamare, etc. These tend to really mean to call rather than to shout. So, somewhere in the history of clamare, it seems to have shifted from shouting to calling, which are sort of semantically very similar notions. In some early examples, where clamare means to shout. So, for example, in Seneca, clamo mihi ipse munera anus tuos. I shout. Oh, sorry. Yeah, and that's a typo there. I shout to myself, count your years. Clamo mihi ipse, then a clause. From as early as Catullus, we already have ad being used here in place of the dative. So atne omnes clama janua culpa tua es. So everyone shouts at me, do, it's your fault. Okay, so these two examples, they're very interesting because we see atne being functionally parallel to mihi in the first example, and also these verbs, these examples of a clamare mean to shout. That you shout a clause, you shout a theme to somebody. In the Christian era, however, so for example, in the Latin Bible, Psalm, etc., we get examples like this: "De profundis clamavi a te, Domine." I mean, we could analyze this literally as, from the depths of, I shouted something to you at te, Domine. But really, I think this example, anticipates the Romance meaning of calling. From the depths of my heart, I called you, I called upon you at te, Domine. So here, in the absence, in the omission of the thing being shouted, clamare can be reanalyzed as calling, clamavi a te, Domine. But in the same period, verbs, clamare meaning calling still exists because there are also many examples of a clamare taking a theme. So, for example, in this example in Augustine, so adversus nos facta sua clamant. They shout their deeds to us. Adversus nos facta sua clamant. And so, the thing about this type of reanalysis, where the add marked object is reanalyzed from an indirect object to a direct object due to the change in valency in clamare, is that we get a synchronic opposition between human animate objects and unmarked inanimate objects. So yes, as seen in the Christian example, the clamavi ate, I called you, versus sua facta sua clamant. They shouted what they did. And we get the synchronic opposition between animacy and inanimacy, marked by add or not, respectively. Similar things can be said about verbs of begging. Now, in classical Latin, there are numerous verbs of begging which take a very similar syntax. Rogare, petere, implorare, poscere, postulare, and all the various compound forms like ex rogare, ad rogare, ex petere, etc. In the Christian era, similar verbs would take on a different meaning. That means to pray, so, orare, which means to beg in classical Latin. But in Christian era, it can mean to pray. Supplicare, similarly, to beg and to pray. And these verbs are typically select ab as designated the human and animate source. You beg something from somebody, you ask something from somebody. And in the medieval era, ab was often misspelled as ad due to its contemporary phonetics probably. Ad and ab became phonetically and hence orthographically confused. I mean, from as early as Plautus, we get you examples like this. Numquam abse petam. Okay, this literally means I shall never seek it from you, abstinent. But given that the direct object is missing, we may be able to think of it like this: I shall never beg you. Numquam abste petam. There's only one overt argument here, marked by ad, and we may be able to anticipate romance here by analyzing this as a direct dependent on petam. Abste petam, I beg you. And of course, throughout the history of Latin, the use of a double accusative with verbs of begging, are common. So, rogare aliquem aliquid, I beg someone something. Aliquem, morphological accusative, so I beg someone something. And of course, in the Christian and medieval era, we get examples where ad, similar to the Plautus example, is directly construed with the verbs of begging. So Moise says, orabat ad dominum. Veniam ad domino poposcebat. Moses was begging the Lord. This probably does mean beg, but however, within the Christian context, orare ad can often mean praying. Someone was praying to God or to the Lord Almighty, etc. In the second example, which is secular, the Chronicon Salernitanem is not a religious piece of text, but we get examples like this where poposcebat ad dominum. Veniam ad domino poposceva. She demanded the Lord for mercy. This would originally be she demanded mercy from the Lord, ab being confused with ad. But here, I think it can be sort of reanalyzed as she demanded the Lord ad dominum for mercy. Currently with her. So similar to clamare, ad and ab here also seem to designate human and animate objects because they denote the source of begging, and this comes into opposition with inanimate, unmarked objects. So again, we see the synchronous opposition between animacy and inanimacy. Right. So if we look at the late Christian and medieval Latin examples again. Servire, because servire a sancta Maria. Similarly, because servire a sancto facundo, or serviam a filiis nostris. De profundis clamavi a te, Moses orabat ad dominum, veniam ad domino poposcepa. One thing about these zombies, not only are these objects human and they're also divine. Because when you serve someone who is higher than you. When you shout, within the Christian context, this really means to invoke. You invoke someone at domine, someone who is senior, someone who is more powerful than you are, i.e., or e.g., your Lord God Almighty within a Christian context. Orare ad, poposcepat ad. Within the religious context, you pray to your Lord or to your God, etc. And within the secular context, as is the case with the last example here, you demand or you beg your Lord, your chief, within the Roman feudal context for something. So ad here doesn't just select a human animate object. It also tends to select a particular type of object, which is divine and senior or socially superior to you. And this clearly rings some bells, as we shall see later on. All right, so if we just briefly summarize, the earliest examples of ad are used with verbs of evasion. So verbs of evasion plus ad, where ad here is referential. So ad here, being allative, denotes direction and destination. The object, hence, is highly referential. Verbs of serving, which selects recipients and beneficiary, etc. The object here, which replaces the morphological dative, denotes a recipient and beneficiary, which also tends to be human, animate, and divine. Verbs of shouting, within religious context, also denotes human, animate, and divine. And your ad, which denotes the direction of calling, originally becomes reanalyzed as a marker of the direct object. Verbs of begging and praying, selecting an object marked by ad or ab, denoting originally the source of begging, can also, or tends also to select human, animate, and also divine objects. So we can see how in the formation, or in the Latin proto-Romance formation of Adam, how ad comes to mark the human and referential objects. So if you look at the Romance of Vivi Shell again, all right, okay, so we showed that affected objects of highly affective and transitive verbs, they can also be marked by and. But I think as we see in Portuguese and also in historical Latin and Romance, it's also the a worshipee. If the verb denotes some kind of a worship within the religious context, the object, which is originally the source, can be reanalyzed as a worshipee, and here with the worshipee tends to be marked by ad. Definiteness and as we saw that these examples, these D elements also select ad. So we put the ad triggers here, proper names, and finally nouns of the human and divine. These can also give that. The key notion here is to remember that in Spanish and Italian, in Italian dialects, definiteness here plays a bigger role. So it's human and referential. So we get some kind of feature syncretism here, where there needs to be a D feature in the N layer, and that triggers ad. But we get this layered distribution of DOM triggers, where add, the DOM marker, can be selected by numerous grammatical functional layers. All right, so here is a summary of the Latin examples, which gives rise to the proto-Romance distribution. Our conclusions, if we just briefly conclude, in accordance with contemporary case theories, inherent case and semantic case, P, in the case of ad, tends to have selectional restrictions, and they select particular types of grammatical semantic roles, e.g. beneficiary, recipient, experiencer, which tend to be human and animate, and also direction and destination, which tend to be highly referential. Verbs of serving, calling, and praying, etc., in the late period also tend to select divine objects, a particular subtype of human objects, ad dominum, etc. So I think we can briefly summarize that ad plus the object of ad tends to have some kind of D properties, which, as I defined at the beginning of my talk, is that D here denotes definiteness, determiner, or divine. We can see how in historical formation of Romance ad, how ad comes to select these D types of objects, determiner and divine. Right, so if I just finish off by thanking all of you for attending my talk today. In Spanish, I was agradezco a todos vosotros por asistir a mi colloquio. Okay, a here is obligatory because I'm giving thanks to you. You are pronouns, also you are human animals. Agradezco a todos vosotros. In Portuguese, however, it's a bit different. Eu agradeço a todos vocês por assistirem ao meu colóquio, por qualquer ajuda que me puderem dar. As we see, Portuguese only allows a for marking human, for marking divine objects. So I probably shouldn't use a here because that would be blasphemous. But I would just put a little caveat here, porque todos vocês são como divindades para mim. Agradeço a todos vocês. Thank you very much, and please get in touch.